Business would be a lot easier without all the people and their issues. Of course, there would be no business without the people and their issues. This is The Next Simple Step. I'm Paul Goldsmith. I say this all the time to my team at the fundraising consulting company. When a client or customer has complications and things just aren't working right, and I said, this is why we have a business. We're here to solve problems, not argue with people. And today, I want to share with you 3 questions I use multiple times a day to minimize issues, get moving on important projects, and clean up messes at work. I'm not perfect, but these questions definitely help me be better. And these questions are simple. They're designed to just challenge your thinking in the moment, to simplify your actions and push you a little bit out of your comfort zone. So stick around. You don't want to miss this. The first question, anytime you get stuck or maybe even challenged by someone on your team, pause and ask yourself, what is my end goal? Is it to win this argument, to be right, have my ego stroked, or is it to learn something new? Foster better communication and camaraderie with my teammates. You get to decide. If the goal is to win, great, do that. If that is the most important thing to you with this other person or with the team, but know that that's going to limit your options down the road, and maybe that's okay. But just be clear about what your end goal is. And I've had to rethink and learn this one many times, too many times, to count, because I'm a quick start. I like to move fast, and I think I'm right. As my wife will point out, I think I'm always right. But my counter to that is, of course I do, because if I didn't think I was right, I'd change my mind. However, I've learned to not put it in such a binary way, right and wrong. Most things, there's a lot of gray area. And as Mark Manson points out, certainty is the enemy of growth. Let that sit with you for a minute. Certainty is the enemy of growth. What don't I know? What can I learn from this other person? And what I've learned, that most things aren't right or wrong. There are many ways to accomplish the same thing, and you have to get others' perspective if you really want to get them to go along with you for the long haul. And in this moment where you're being challenged and you want to get through it and foster better collaboration, think about it in terms of learning and how can you build trust with your team so that they'll want to go further with you and they'll continue to contribute ideas, because we've got AI to do all the things that don't require a lot of critical thinking. The goal of having people on your team is to think for themselves, not just to execute whatever you think up. And getting a better win for the team means slowing down and clarifying on the regular, what is your end goal? What does this team member or the team as a whole actually think? Not what they tell me they think when I put them on the spot. As a manager or owner of a business, let this sink in. If you're not careful, you'll start to believe your team always agrees with you. Now, this is easier to spot in other people, but it's true of you too. Your team doesn't always agree with you. They just like getting paid, and they don't want to rock the boat. Particularly if you have a fragile ego, they're going to do everything to tell you that you're right, even when they disagree. But of course, they'll share it with others. And I'll give you an example. In our new restaurant, we have over 30 hourly employees, mostly teenagers. And so our manager has to juggle a lot of things when it comes to scheduling. So we started hearing through the grapevine that a few of the teenagers were unhappy with their schedule, and they were scheduled to work on some of the days they had previously requested off. When my wife or I asked them if they had said anything to the manager who's doing the scheduling, each of them said no. And a couple people even turned in their notice. They quit, without saying anything to the manager that the schedule didn't work for them. They would rather find another job than to have this confrontation. And it shouldn't be a confrontation. It should be a conversation, but you have to realize the power imbalance here. And so I don't blame the employees at all. That's on management. Ultimately, me as the owner, we are having to revamp the whole scheduling process to make it more collaborative and clarifying with the team ahead of time each week before the schedule comes out that this is a workable schedule. Now, I can sense there are some people listening that might be a visceral reaction because back in the day, it was like, man, I'm the boss and you do what I say, you show up when I tell you, and you do it with a smile. That is not the world we live in. Plus, it's not a real great way to treat people, in my opinion. And ultimately, you want people to want to be there, especially in an hourly job situation like the restaurant. We know that these teenagers that can go get a job virtually anywhere, there's lots of jobs to be had. So we want them to work here, and we need their buy-in, and we need them to feel respected and honored when they request certain time off. Again, the question is, what's the end goal? And our end goal is to have people that show up and think like owners and want to be at work and are excited because they know that they're valued and respected, and they pass that on to our customers who then want to return for business. And I'll give you one other example. We have a gym, and at the gym, the team has a million ideas about how we can celebrate our members and retain them and then do outreach to get new ones. I have a few ideas myself, but the team doesn't have time for any more ideas. What, in my opinion, they need is to rally around one or two great ideas for the time that we're in, for the current season, and execute, because complexity is the enemy of execution. And if you have a million ideas, you're not going to make progress or much progress at all on any of them, rather than if you have one or two and you're all focused on executing those ideas. And so that leads me to question number 2, when you're having some confusion at work. And that question is, how can I make this more clear? As the saying goes, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And so if you're seeing these same types of issues popping up time over time, back up and ask yourself, when you go to make a statement, issue a new policy or directive, how can I make this more clear? We're all bombarded with tens of thousands of messages every day. It's just the world we live in. And so people aren't stupid, they're just distracted. And so your words may be clear to you, but are they clear to your audience? And so I really like to check myself every time I'm asking somebody to do something. How can I make this more clear? One way that I do that is I say it to the person I'm communicating to, and then I ask them, is that clear? What did you hear me say? And then I put it in writing. After we have a conversation, follow up with a recap of the conversation via email or in Slack. This doesn't eliminate all miscommunication, but it certainly helps in expressing what I actually mean by my words, because there's so much unsaid. There's so many assumptions on all sides. When you're trying to provide clarity, you have to go out of your way to say it forward, backward, repeat it, and then put it in writing. It drives me crazy, or it used to, because I'm like, I thought I was clear. Well, that's on me. I wasn't clear because maybe something somebody else said yesterday, or something I said a week ago, and I'm contradicting myself, or there are assumptions made by every individual. You make them just as well as everybody else that you bring to the table from your last job, from your family situation. Everybody has their own assumptions they bring to the table. So when you're trying to make something clear, one of the ways to do that is to clarify back what your end goal is. What are you trying to accomplish? What does it look like? What is it that has to be true when you get there? And you can flip it on its head. What don't you want to see happen? The more clarity you can provide, the less messes you have to clean up later. You ever notice when someone goes to champion an idea and maybe others in the meeting don't quite get it, or they don't want to do it? They gradually steer the conversation away. And I don't think it's necessarily conscious in the moment. Maybe they make a joke or just throw out a completely different topic that is seemingly urgent, and maybe it is, but then the original idea just kind of gets lost in the shuffle. That's got to stop. And one way I do this is when I have a meeting, I take notes, and if it's on Zoom, I use an AI bot to capture the notes, and they're brilliant, so it's fantastic. But in person, I write them myself, and each item has an owner and a deadline, or it's not even an idea I want to consider. It's like we're throwing this out, and I'm clear with the team. If we're deciding to move forward on an idea, it has to have an owner and a deadline, or it doesn't exist. Owner, deadline, and I put that deadline on a calendar because so many things that happen every single day, in addition to being bombarded with information, but then things change. Other situations arise that we have to deal with, and then we can look at the calendar and decide that maybe we want to do it a different way in the future, but we have to put a placeholder on that idea before we move on. How can I make this more clear is something that I repeat to myself before I send an email, before I send a Slack or have a conversation. It's not perfect, but it certainly helps. And finally, it's in the name of the podcast, so I have to add it as one of my 3 questions that I ask to clean up any confusion at work or really at home, anywhere you go, is how can I make this more simple? We often overcomplicate things because we don't understand them well enough. As I said, complexity is the enemy of execution. When you make something complex, you're much less likely to stick with it. In fact, you're almost guaranteeing that you're going to fail. And so when you set a goal, make it as simple as possible. And particularly when it comes to sales, I'm learning friction leads to people giving up, quitting. At our gym, everyone has a million reasons why they can't commit to the gym right now. Everybody will agree they want to get healthier, they want to get more fit, but few people actually want to do it today to make the commitment. And so every bit of friction, everything we put in somebody's way to make that decision to join our gym gives them an out. And if they walk in our gym or they send an email to our gym or they call the phone, they're clearly interested. There's something that is in them that has them curious about what it would look like to join our gym. And so it is on us to clarify and make it as simple as possible for them to say, yes, I would love to join that community. Yes, I want to commit to better health and fitness. But to do that, we have got to make the process as simple as possible. And one brand new tool that we're using is we downloaded an app on the gym phone. It's a cell phone. There's certain times when there's no one at the desk and the phone rings and no one answers. And that isn't simple because now someone has to leave a voicemail and a lot of people don't. And it's sort of a lost lead, if you will. Now, our team has a habit of calling people back, but the moment that they call is the best possible way to engage with them, to make it simple for them to come in and get a tour. But if we don't answer the phone, that's not simple. We've added complexity to the process. And so we downloaded an app on the gym phone that immediately texts the person back. If we miss a call, it sends them a text and that says something like, sorry, we missed your call. If you have an immediate question, send us a text back, or here's a link to the website. You can check out our schedule and book a free tour. And we're still refining that process, but we wanted them to immediately be recognized and send a text that then our team can follow up with. So it's not perfect, but it definitely makes the process a little more simpler than missing a call. And then the team member, when they call them back, has to sort of guess what the person was calling about. And oftentimes they'll get a voicemail. So the text at least begins the conversation at the moment they decide they want to have a conversation. And that's really it. All business, you have to do it on the terms of your customers, because if they're not ready to buy a car, it doesn't matter how amazing the car is or slick your salespeople are. If the person doesn't show up to the showroom and isn't interested in buying a car, it's hard to sell them a car. So if somebody shows up in your business, or they email, or they call, or some other way, reach out and have an expression of interest, ask yourself, how can I make this more simple for people to buy your product? And that means breaking things down, seeing it from the customer's point of view. The more steps you have, the more people you lose. When it comes to a website, how many clicks can you remove? This is why Amazon is the biggest company in the world, because they have one-click ordering. I clicked on that button and had something within 2 hours yesterday. That is still magic. That's amazing. So how can you be more like Amazon and have one-click ordering? And there was no shipping costs. They took out all the friction. I'm always looking for a way to make things, the buying process in particular, more simple, because I've heard Donald Miller say this: if you confuse, you lose. So don't confuse your potential customers or your existing customers. Make it super easy for them to buy and then buy again. Make it recurring. Getting better at anything requires fresh thinking. It requires a little bit of discomfort, of slowing yourself down, getting out of your own way, and being clear about what it is you're trying to accomplish ultimately. Part of growing up is deciding what you want, big picture, over what you want right now to satisfy your discomfort. And I think that's why it's really a struggle to untether from our cell phones at certain times, because we'll get anxious, and I definitely am guilty of this myself, to satisfy that itch, that anxiety of not knowing what to do next or having too many things to do. So just pick up the phone and relieve that uncomfortableness with scrolling. And so if you can set that aside, if you're feeling discomfort, and actually clarify, what's my goal for today, and write down the 3 things that have to happen today and miss all the other hundreds of things that you're going to do. I created the Next Simple Step podcast because I see in my own life that I have all of these ideas and I don't seem to make progress on them because I haven't made them simple enough. I haven't clarified what I ultimately want, and I've not been clear about what's most important. You can't have 100 priorities. And so I hope this has been helpful for you today. If these questions are valuable to you and you've been able to use one or all 3, let me know. I'd love to hear from you. You can reach out on Instagram or X. I'm Paul J. Goldsmith, or at nextsimplestep.com. Thank you for listening, and I'll talk to you next time on the Next Simple Step podcast.